Welcome back to the Manufacturing Come Up. I'm your host, Malachi Greb, and today we have Matt McCarty with T.I.E. Welcome. Glad to have you today, Matt.
Hey, thank you, Malachi. Glad to be here with you today.
Thank you. Thank you. So, why don't you go ahead and start off by telling people kind of where you're at in your career?
Yeah, so I'm in the profession of sales. I've done a number of things to kind of arrive at this place. Entered into the space that I operate in, really in sort of a quasi sales operations type of role, and eventually kind of got drug kicking and screaming into the field of sales, which was initially kind of intimidating and I didn't quite understand it, but I knew enough about the product and the customers where it made sense. And I've really quickly found myself in my career in a number of leadership roles, and have kind of grown it from there, and just learned a tremendous amount as I've gone along the way.
So, you started out in sales, or what did your initial beginnings look like?
No, so actually, I kind of randomly came into being in the industry where I was going to school for commercial graphics at a university, or at a college called Midlands Technical College, and this really was just going to be a job to kind of pay the bills as I went, and ended up turning into something that I ended up liking, and found some traction into. But no, I was sort of an embedded on-site contractor at a
Hmm.
local paper mill, where the company that I worked for was a company that repaired the equipment that was in there, and they did enough volume out of there that it made sense to put a person on site that managed that, sort of managed inventory, and took care of all the transactions of taking a broken piece of equipment, a motor or a drive or something like that, getting it shipped out, getting it repaired, getting it brought back in, and making sure they had enough spare parts to run their
Awesome.
production.
What did that position kind of look like? Because that definitely is a pretty interesting role, and I feel like it's actually pretty common with a lot of like your bigger companies out there, like a lot of your steel mills, a lot of your like big Toyota manufacturers. They have a lot of on-site contractors full time.
They do, and it's definitely interesting. It's not. I wouldn't recommend it for anyone that doesn't do well without lots of supervision, because it's you're out there on your own
Mm,
a good little bit. Your company's remote. Chances are your supervisor is remote, and it's sort of a keep up with each other via phone, email, text, and things like that. But yeah, you wind up being sort of this ambassador for on behalf of your company to the customer, and it's kind of interesting too, because you'll find yourself sort of, hey, I've got two bosses here, right? Because I've got my company that expects certain outcomes, and they've got certain interest here, but
mm.
I'm here to service a customer, and and ultimately they've got to be happy as well. So that can be kind of interesting to make sure that everybody's being well served in the relationship, and to sort of have that role at an entry level position when you're in your mid 20s is an interesting fence
Yeah,
to straddle, to
absolutely.
say the
So
least.
is that kind of like a um, what like customer relationship management type of position, or what exactly does that look like?
Yeah, I would definitely categorize it as that, but certainly, that, along with, coming in there and being the subject matter expert that really knows what, and can advise the customer on what they need to do to maintain an appropriate level of spare parts, and make the best sort of sourcing decisions for the repairs that they need to do.
And so from there, what was your next career transition?
Yeah, from there, I was probably in that for about 18 months, and then found myself, getting an opportunity to supervise more people that were in that same role. So it was sort of a working leader, supervisory position where, you know, previously I was just going into this one plant, and now I would still run that one plant. I was able to hire an assistant, and now I got to get out and travel and
Mhm.
get outside of just paper mills, and I got to go to steel mills and auto assembly
Mhm.
plants and engine plants and tire plants, and very passionate about manufacturing. So being able to get out there and see all these different things was a pretty good attractant for me
All
as
right.
a young man, wanting to get some traction in the industry and see
Yeah,
what else is
absolutely. So
out there.
it definitely provided like a ton of different exposures to what's going on in the industry, different plants and manufacturing processes.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I like to joke to friends that don't really get, who aren't in the industry and don't really get what I do. I'll tell them, I say, actually, first and foremost, I'll just tell them I sell robots, and then they're amazed at that. But yeah, I do a lot more than that. But I would describe my work environment as if you ever watch the show How It's Made,
Yep.
I get to do that every day of the week, and that's pretty awesome. I get to see all the coolest manufacturing applications out there, and sometimes even
Yeah,
get my hands on the
I think it's
product.
awesome that still to this day, like I walk into a manufacturing facility, I'm just still awed by, especially when you see a line with 20, 50 robots on it and like BIW lines, those are just impressive to see.
Yeah, well, sure, and I mean, it's definitely impressive to see to somebody that doesn't know what went into it. But if you do what I do or what you do for a living, and it's so much more impressive when you realize what went into creating that pretty big cell that
Yeah,
does some pretty
yeah,
awesome
absolutely.
things.
So much engineering time that goes into it, so much, just hard work and labor, creativity.
Yeah, and creativity, particularly
Yep.
on the
Yeah,
integration
absolutely.
side,
Because I
right?
mean, realistically, it all starts with the concept. From there, how did you transition to the next thing?
Yeah, from there it was really just kind of staying in the same space, managing these repair programs and just getting increased responsibility. And then I ended up making a change of employment, worked to another company, and kind of did the same thing. They had the same programs, they ran it a little bit differently. It's kind of a breath of fresh air because I think they were a lot more resourceful with what they had and how they thought about creating value for customers. So that ended up being pretty fun. But yeah, I really only got to do that for about 6 months. And a guy who was the sales manager in the company, I got to spend some time around him. He came and tapped me on the shoulder and said, "Hey, we've got a guy who's leaving the company and he's covering your area." And he goes, I think it's about time you get into the field of sales. I think you're squandering some talent there, and I'd like to see what you could do with it. So kind of took a leap of faith there from a place where I was pretty comfortable. I was in a mid-level management role that was fun and challenging, but at this point I'd done it over 10 years, and it was actually time to do something different. So yeah, I just feet first, just jumped into an outside sales territory and started just kind of honing my chops. Now, good thing for me is was incredibly familiar with and comfortable with the product. Like I said, I'd already kind of been in quasi sort of sales role anyway, but yeah, it was just a matter of getting out there and taking that product knowledge and knowing how customers think about and what their needs are, and just taking that out there and promoting it. I think probably one of the biggest challenges was getting out there and realizing just how much rejection folks that work in the sales space have to go to get to a yes. Um, Once upon a time, I was assistant coach for my twin boys when they were in baseball, and I live in South Carolina. One of the guys from the University of South Carolina's national championship team, their coaches came down and talked to the boys, and he said, "Hey, let's talk about failure." And I thought, "Oh boy, this is going to be good, right?" He says, "You know what happens to a professional baseball player that strikes out 7 times out of 10?" And the kids are all kind of like, "What? That sounds pretty bad." He goes, "That guy goes to the Hall of Fame. That's what happens. He's a 300 hitter." So I really kind of took that sort of mentality with me. I thought it was a great, and it was right when I got into the space too. So it was like, man, what a great time to hear something like that and use that to realize, like, yeah, man, you gotta you gotta endure a lot of no's on the way to some yeses there. And I'd encourage anybody, particularly in the marketing or sales space, to kind of mull that over a little bit, because
Yeah.
rejection
Yeah,
can be tough.
absolutely. I don't know. I mean, I'm not exactly sure what it is about our sales process, but like we don't really necessarily have to deal with the no's as much as we do with like just not necessarily winning an RFQ or a customer not moving forward with the project. But definitely one of the things that I've experienced is like the number side of things. Like we just have to do way more numbers. Like if we want to win, like I think we like as of right now we have a 10-to-1 ratio is what we kind of aim for. So if we want to win one order, we need to quote 10 projects, and that generally puts us in a pretty safe
Sure.
ballpark to land at least that one order. And sometimes we get lucky, we land two or three of those orders or something like that. But generally, the you just have to keep that ratio in mind. And another thing that I found very very valuable is like keep making shifts to what you're currently doing, especially on like I said, it's the winning the RFQs that was more the challenge. So like making some shifts to like bump up that ratio and trying to focus on that. Like what can I do to like first of all identifying like why our customers not buying, right? And then from there trying to adapt and make changes so that way you people are more accepting to purchase from you.
Yeah, I think there when the way you describe it, I think there are two ways to think about that, right? Quantity or quality. You could say, hey, I just got to get more leads and run more of them to ground, or you can look at the pivots you can make and go, okay, what is it about what I'm doing that maybe isn't resonating with the customer, or maybe I'm not meeting the value they're looking for, whatever that looks like. Can I pivot and fine tune this, and can I listen better to the customer? Can I be more consultative to understand what it is they need and to discover how I can find a way to fit that into what I'm doing so that it makes sense for the customer as well as the company I'm working for. For us, it's interesting because when you're talking about project oriented work, yeah, that's a long way to the finish line, right? And yeah, you certainly need to have a certain amount of them and anticipate that a certain amount won't go through
Hmm.
for one reason or another. I'm in an industry that's far more kind of transactional in nature, right? I mean, we're doing repairs and we sell spare parts for customers when they have machine tools and robots go down. Um, we the number of leads and the number of sales we're pursuing needs to be a lot higher because we're not making sales in $500,000 chunks at a time, right? I mean, we're literally making
Yeah.
them $3,500
Yeah.
at a time. So it takes an awful lot of them to
Yeah,
fill that
yeah,
pipeline
absolutely.
up.
It's like kind of like relationally, it's almost the equivalent of like profit margins and whatnot, as similar to like a vehicle sale, right? Some of your pricings can be around those
Yeah.
same prices, and or maybe even like used vehicle pricing and whatnot. Because I actually spent like the first couple years of my career doing robot refurb work. That's kind of where like I did my initial like apprenticeshipping and learning of robotic
Yeah.
systems and whatnot.
Yeah, that's cool. Well, I think you just said something really important in there too, and that is, relationship. I mean, I think a lot of folks can get tied up in, hey, am I putting something out there at the right price to win it? Am I doing all these things? But so many of the little nitty gritty things that win and lose jobs, aren't don't have to be the primary consideration if you've built that relationship with a customer or client based on gaining trust, right? I mean, because if you don't have that, then you really are literally into let's just sort of death by scope, right? I mean, let's just look at
Yep.
every little nitty gritty thing, and you know how it works. I mean, it's the customer's job almost to kind of
Mhm.
grind you down and get it as cheap as they can. But if you build that relationship that says, hey, this job I'm going to do for you is bigger than just what you're going to pay for or what you're going to get. It's the fact that I'm guaranteeing an outcome for you. That's really what I'm selling you is not
Thing.
a $501
Yeah.
thousand dollar project that I could knock a buck off if I needed to. It's the fact that you need to automate a line, and I'm going to help get you there by concept and by partnership and responsible sourcing and
Yeah.
everything else you can imagine
Yeah,
that goes into
absolutely.
that.
That's been like a key shift for like our sales process and for myself is just like before I used to not really call. I'd be like, okay, we sent the quote, we'll let it sit for some time, let them look at it, whatever, right? And what I kind of realized is like almost doing like a disservice to not calling and saying, hey, by the way, we sent you the quote. Just want to know if you had a chance to look at it, or just, hey, we sent it to you. I just wanted to touch base. If you guys have any questions or concerns, feel free to, it's like really, it's like creating that openness and just like it's no problem because maybe on their end that they're hesitant to call you, you know, And so by creating that openness, now they're much more likely to send you an email or call you to discuss the RFQ further.
Yeah, no, absolutely, and I think really where where you kind of establish that that's going to happen is in the dialogue that leads up to the quoting event, right? It's not it's not something that goes unsaid, and then you run the risk of looking like a pesky salesperson trying to chase down an order just because you want a commission. And it's more about, hey, listen, you and I are going to collaborate on this, and there it's going to result in a quote. And when that happens, there are all sorts of ways that you're going to be able to interpret this. So expect that I'm going to contact you, and expect that I'm going to want to talk through, what I've given you, and help you interpret it, and anticipate that you're going to have questions, anticipate that you might want to change some things and tweak them out to be
Yeah.
optimal for what you're
Yeah,
trying to do.
absolutely. And like, even with something like with what you guys do, like I'm not sure if you guys go through and like will add options and stuff like that to the robots. Maybe you can clarify some of this, but something like that might be
Yeah.
a decision on why to buy or not to buy. Oh, we didn't know you would install options for us. We bought this other robot because it had the options already installed.
Yeah, so 100%. It's kind of funny, we sell refurbished robots, right? And in doing so, we're going to market really trying to differentiate ourselves and say, hey, you've got new robots, and everybody knows about new robots, and you've got used robots. For a
Yep.
lot of people, that's a question mark, right? What we're selling is a refurbished robot, and oh, by the way, we're going to have a consultative conversation with you that says, okay, what's your application? How are you communicating back to a network? How are you planning to communicate from your control out to the end of arm tooling? What sort of peripheral devices do you need? What sort of software do you need to run safer? I mean, these are all things that don't happen when you buy a used piece of equipment. So this really kind of comes down to a strong differentiation factor that says, I'm not just selling you something that's going to show up on a skid and then I disappear. I'm here for the long haul. I want to get you into what's going to work for you, and I'm going to be by your side as you run that thing, and as you go to production, to make sure that everything's running good. And what else can I do for you?
I'm not sure like what your sales process looks like and everything like that, but do you experience a lot of customers who are maybe not even have thought about purchasing a used robot?
We absolutely do. Yeah, in fact, that's I like to say, we it's a good bit of evangelizing that we're doing out there right now, and the last 18 to 24 months has been a pretty interesting time. I know you're aware. It's very hard to get new robots, and it all kind of came out of COVID and some of the restrictions on manufacturing over in Asia, and it's just kind of rippled because at the same time you've got this just staggering, demand for robotics, not just in your traditional industries, but in all sorts of general industries. And all the robot manufacturers right now will tell you what's booming for them is not automotive. It's this category called general industry that is this bucket of everything else under the sun that everybody's racing to automate, right? So for us, it's been a really interesting last couple of years because we've got customers out there that normally never would have considered a refurbished robot, but we've had this window where we can introduce the concept to them, but because we've really professionalized the sort of the process of doing that, we're if you look at a scale that is used robot here, new robot up here, we're kind of 80% up the way to what a new robot looks like, with the exception just
Right.
being kind of the price. Um, we're able to deliver even quicker, which has been pretty advantageous for us.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, like I said, with me starting my career off on like the used robot sector, the company I had worked for, one of their game plans was to have a division in used robots, right? And they didn't really pursue it strongly enough. They didn't deploy a whole team towards it. I basically was the team. I was. They wanted me to be the sales guy, the repair guy, the everything guy, and
Yeah,
I had one senior guy that was over me for a year, and he was there after, but like he was kind of doing other things. And so through that process, like I learned quite a bit about used robots and like kind of like the differentiating factor. So we were selling used robots too. We were systems integrator, so it kind of made sense that like we'd be inside of facilities, and sometimes we'd trade work services for robots, right? And so then we'd
Sure.
bring those in. We would refurb them. I mean, some of them would just be a matter of like changing grease batteries, just your normal PM stuff, and it'd be kind of be ready to sell again, and maybe just do some like joint health testing and stuff like that, just make sure all the joints and motors and everything are good. And
Right.
in reality, like the for like the people out there like thinking about used robots, one of the biggest segregators, in my opinion, is the software and also the hardware that goes with the software capabilities, right? So like for example, like most of the systems that we deploy, we're doing Ethernet IP everything, or at least everything that we potentially can, and also CIP safety, right? So but just like at least the Ethernet part of it. So like we would want our robot to be able to have like Ethernet capabilities. So as long as you get like a robot that has like a new enough software version or can be updated to a new enough software version, then realistically, I mean, you're going to get such a long life out of that robot that it's very equivalent to a new one.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I think the name of the game is value add, really. I mean, because like I said, you can buy a used robot. The problem with that is that used robot has been configured for the original owner,
Mm,
and that may not be what the new owner is going to do. So it's all about building it to the spec that they need it to. And when we say integration ready, when that thing shows up, it's shipped there. It's ready to start installing and integrating into communicating with your local PLC, communicating with your safety devices, all of that. But yeah, I mean, and your point's well taken. I mean, everything that we ship out, we relicense from a software standpoint, and we've got a standard package that is the motion package from Fanuc,
mm.
and every single thing we ship's got Ethernet IP adapter on it, unless the customer wants to upgrade to a scanner or upgrade to the advanced
Yep.
package.
Yeah. Yeah. That advanced package is kind of a go-to package.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
That one in advanced DCS.
Yep. Yep. Absolutely. Yeah. Like I don't want to get too much into like that side of things, but I think
Yeah,
it's super valuable. It opens up so much future tools as like we progress into more technologies and things like that. And also remote services is a big side of it.
absolutely.
So as of right now, kind of where do you see your or first of all, let me step back a little bit. When did you land your position with TIE?
Yeah, so I came over to TIE in 2016. I had been senior sales leader at one of our competitors and had a pretty long run there. I'd been there for 11 years, and I had felt like I had done pretty much what I could do there and was ready for a new challenge. I really appreciated everything. I did a lot of growing there. I mean, I kind of came in a mid-level management role. I got to do a lot of really cool things there. I got to be involved in a lot of growth, and I got to lead through a lot of growth. But I was just kind of ready for a new challenge, and I knew TIE a little bit from the just being a competitor that was out there, but they didn't really have much of any sales coverage or effort to speak of, and I actually was working between the companies to have a little bit of a partnership there, and got to know the guys at TIE, and they informed me that they were changing some things up in their leadership, and I said, hey, it's maybe a good time to bring this up, but I've always kind of been surprised that you guys aren't putting much of a sales effort into the field.
Mm,
Um, I could help you with that. I've got a vision for it, and for me, it was like I'd led a pretty big sales team, but the notion of creating one from scratch was incredibly attractive, just from
yeah.
an opportunity to be creative, an opportunity to build something that wasn't there, and to do it in a company that I recognized as being, from my perspective and in my space, really one of the best kept secrets out there. So, yeah, and I'd certainly say to anybody out there that's listening, particularly earlier in your careers, don't think that that the entire job market exists on Indeed.com or LinkedIn or anything like that. I mean,
Mm,
there's a lot to be said for networking and literally creating your own future there, and that's kind of really what I'm in the middle of here. And it's been a great run. It's been a fun ride, and as I've built a team over here, bringing folks in that have been able to achieve things that they've not achieved in their careers, by way of sort of enabling them, from a standpoint of how they can take the company to market, and kind of what their personal rewards are out of that. So it's all been great.
Yeah, absolutely. Like you said, the finding job opportunities outside of like Indeed is super powerful and important. Like I literally landed my job through just discussion and one of my professors being like, "Hey, I actually know somebody," and that landed me a job with
Right.
systems integration that I spent my entire career at before starting Elite, essentially. And so those potential opportunities, like multiple, I think every person that ever started working at that company did not come from a job posting. They came from, I went to church with this person. You know what I mean? I know this person from somebody's baseball team. Like, it's extremely important to keep those conversations open.
Yeah, there's a lot of that in our business, because I mean it's a business that started in the founder's garage, and kind of grew from one building to the next, and yeah, along the way you've got to find people, and and Nashville, Tennessee wasn't necessarily rife with people that were experienced working on FANUC controls. So a lot of it was kind of recruiting people into the business, and teaching them the business. So yeah, a lot of friends and family kind of thing in our business for
Yeah,
sure.
absolutely. The one thing I also think that I see a lot too is systems integrators, at least a majority of them, don't have huge or if any sales team. Like you said, how you came into this company and essentially built up the sales team. A lot of these companies were a guy that started in the garage, hired some people over time. At some point, got enough repeat customers where those same repeat customers, maybe it's one, two, three, five, how many ever that may be. Maybe it's a circle of 10, and those same ones just keep coming back, and kind of the company just organically grows like that over time.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I tell you, I mean, I don't envy, the startup integration company, because it's so tricky, because you really, your founder really has to be both engineer and salesperson to get that off the ground.
Yep.
Because if you're trying to start an integration firm that doesn't have any backlog, and you're trying to pay an engineer and a sales guy as well as some support staff,
Yep.
you're going to be eating beans for a while before that first PO cashes
Oh
in,
yeah.
right? So it's tough, and I think there's been a fair amount of failure in that
Mm.
space, and there's been some strife for people before they make
Yep.
it, and as you know, there's a lot that can go wrong early on in an integration job, in an integration company, that can have some lasting effects. So those are folks those that are true entrepreneurs, and true risk takers, and I've got a tremendous amount of respect for
Well,
them.
thank you. I'll take some of that.
Absolutely.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. Like this, I would not advise somebody to choose this as like a first business venture, especially to go full on system integration. I would take whatever niche that they have, like if they were a programmer at first, or if they were a mechanical engineer at first, that they do that as a service, and then after gaining some traction, then start trying to dive into bigger applications, maybe bringing on some more engineers. Because one thing with like that, so whenever I started this company, one thing that I had to do for myself was I had to break myself out of a 9 to 5 mentality, right? And so I had a fear of like going back to the 9 to 5. I had a fear of like the other thing was like if I did contract work, that I would get comfortable with that money, like making 65 up to $155 an hour, like close to 10x what my salary was, or at least 20x or something, or what would that be, 3 or 4 or 5x, something like that, what my salary was. And at those points, you can get very, very comfortable and just be okay with that. And whenever I started the company, I had vision for like this to grow to become one of the largest companies in the world, and still have that vision. And so like I was concerned with getting comfortable. I knew that I could potentially get comfortable and then never pursue like those dreams.
Absolutely, that makes a ton of sense, and I think we all, in various ways, whether an entrepreneur or not, can get challenged with that, right? Where do you do what's comfortable, or do you undertake some risk there, because you see a bigger picture than than getting by or being comfortable, or whatever. And Yeah, and candidly, in the integration space, even in the industrial repair space, there are all sorts of companies that, they exist, they employ a handful of people, but they hit a certain level and they just never get over that wall.
Right.
And I think it's got everything to do with what you describe of being comfortable and not pushing those
Hmm.
boundaries, not pushing the people that are in your business to be, bigger than they have been so far.
Yep.
I think one of those challenges too is, this was said to me by a guy who owned a company that I used to work for. He said, the people that got me, because he started this from kind of nothing. Said the people that got me to 5 million in revenue weren't the people that could get me to 10 million. And along the way, I kind of had to make adjustments because
Yep.
they were small company people and they couldn't make it to the big. So that's another challenge of, as a business owner, how do you bring people along? And if you so you're talking about, you being comfortable as a business owner. Same thing happens with employees. So I think that kind of comes down to business culture there, and
Yep.
how do we all collectively push ourselves out of our comfort, safely but comfortably
Yeah.
out of comfort zones, right? And that's part of kind of culture and encouragement we all
Mm.
have for one another, and accountability.
Yeah, and I think also too as a business owner that like say first like you're talking about what got me from like 5 million to 50 million or 5 to 10 may not be the same people. I think a lot of that also is like within the business owners, their mind and like their hiring. So like, right now, like if I'm hiring people thinking about the position that we're currently in, and not necessarily for the future. And like also like this is one of the big mistakes that I had made was kind of just hiring people to fill positions and looking for skill and not putting enough emphasis on like culture and like vision. So like a big thing is like here's the shift is like now in interviews I'm telling people like this is not going to be an easy place to work. This is going to be hard. This is going to be we're going to be we're striving to become the biggest, one of the best, like you know what I mean, like this is the culture that we have, a very outgoing culture, and if this is not necessarily what you want, then this is not necessarily the company for you. And it's just a matter of us not necessarily being a fit. And first, like, you don't have those conversations, and still now I don't have as much as I should, I guess, right? Because I personally don't want somebody to spend multiple years with us to then decide like, oh, like this isn't going to be a fit for me. Or on the other hand of like, within the first year of business, like getting kind of beat up, and like as the owner, me, right, getting beat up just like trying to sell and trying to engineer and trying to do all these things and being overworked, that like at some point you're kind of just trying to grow and survive, and your vision can get lost. So now all aspects. If the company owner's vision, I think a company and all the people within the company are whatever the owner's vision is and what they portray to and show as an example to their employees. And if they're not doing that, then it just ends up being randomly whatever occurs.
Yeah, look, I think the strategic companies and strategic leaders are thinking, it's like a chess match, right? I mean, you're thinking 3-5 moves ahead. You're not thinking about now. And I think, relevant to what you talk about in your podcast here often is, the notion of people entering the workforce and all that. So as people who hire, you do it, I do it. I'm not. I'm only partially buying what a person is today. I'm buying into what they can be, right?
Mm-hmm.
What I can glean out of my time with them that I think they can do, if I can get them into my system and I can get them into the culture of my company and doing what we do. Um, been largely successful with that, but that's not just a me effort.
Mm-hmm.
That's me up to our CEO, and that's everybody else in the company embracing a collective culture that is, that is excellence, and that is we challenge each other to be more, to be bigger, to grow there, and not just be, what you walked in the door as, right?
Yeah.
So that's, we're butterflies, right? Come in as caterpillars, and we all hope to grow wings and be pretty, right?
Yeah, absolutely. And another thing too that I've recognized is that like you yourself are not ready for certain things at certain stages in your career. And a perfect example, like one, like what you're doing now, like if you said, hey, do that 15 years ago, 10 years ago, whatever it may be, right, you might be like, oh, well, I don't know if I had the capabilities to do those things. And like one thing that I see now is like whenever the owner of the company I was at, they were, wanting me to run their refurb side of their business. I wasn't where I wasn't there, right? They were expecting me to do something, and I wasn't there in my career and my skill set, confidence, all different types of things, right? To be able to take that on and run with it, right? Whereas like a today me or today like you could go into that same type of position and be able to run with it and turn it into multi-million-dollar business. And it's just something that, it's timing, right? Like you have to gain the certain amount of experiences to uh, be ready for certain positions within the company.
Well, there's no doubt, and inevitably people wind up fighting the notion of impatience in there, right?
Mm,
I dealt with that in my career as well. I mean, the first time I got into a senior executive role was in my 30s, and I was, I still had some maturity issues to be what I really needed to be in that job. And, and when I got confronted with those, I found myself getting a little bit impatient about
mm.
those. And, and I can look back on those things now and go, yeah, I mean, I did a good job, but man, it's the old adage, if I knew then what I knew now,
Yeah.
golly, how much different could those things have been? And yeah, but I think when you're on a good career path, I do think that there's a lot to be said for being patient. I mean, challenge yourself, right? But be patient to understand what you have in your toolbox and what you don't, and rather than focusing on not getting some kind of opportunity, focus on building that toolbox out and recognizing, being honest with yourself about where you do have shortcomings, working on refining those things so that you can get that opportunity when the time comes.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. I like to I'm not sure what you put how you put the word to it, but like for me, I always try to be like adaptive, right? And ready to make a change because like one, I'm young for being a CEO, and I know the version of me
Mm-hmm.
as a CEO because I'm thinking like this is kind of why I got kind of excited about like talking about like where you're at in your career because the me today won't even be the same me that I need to be able to operate us at $50 million in revenue or $100 million in revenue. Like the me, if I want to continue being CEO, I have to make some major adjustments. I have to spend a ton of extra time, like educating myself, and I mean, really that just educating myself, adapting myself, changing to be able to be ready to take on the next step. And I think anybody in their career, like if they want to become something in their career, if they can train themselves and educate themselves for like whatever that next step is, that it's going to highly accelerate and propel you into whatever you want your next career step to be.
Yeah, so I think there are two components I'd add to that. One is in a senior role like yours, you need leaders, you need strong leaders around you that challenge you to do that, right? I mean, you're very driven on your own, but leaders that, even though they're working for you, would challenge you to do
Mm,
things you haven't done before,
yeah.
right? That winds up being critical for the person who's not necessarily outright leading a company. What winds up being critical, and this would be my encouragement to anybody who's watching this and trying to climb the ladder that is their career, is get hooked up with people who will mentor you.
Mm,
Because I tell you what, any of us who are successful certainly will point to ability, skills, drive, those sorts of things. Those are ours, and those are kind of uniquely ours. But man, I owe so much to people that mentored me along the way, who took an interest in me and poured into me things that I needed to know. I've got this ambition for when I hit retirement age. I don't feel like I want to get out of the business. What I want to do, I want to hang out and I want to emulate this guy that was really spoke into my career early on. This was a guy named Bill DeBow, and anybody who used to work with me at this one company will remember Bill DeBow because he was a crazy senior statesman of the company. He didn't need to work. The guy was pretty well set for life. He'd done really well, but work was his boys' club, and to not work was to feel
mm,
excluded for him. So he hung out, and And yeah, sometimes he was just kind of hanging out and making trouble or whatever. But one thing that Bill did was Bill took an interest in people and he took them under his wing. And so this is a company in Detroit, and I was working remote. But anytime I would come up there for meetings or whatever, whether he took me out to lunch or whether he just kind of found me in an office or something, Bill always, and I didn't reach out and tell him I was coming. He knew I was coming.
Really?
He would come find me and go, all right, let's talk about what's going on here. And how are you thinking about this? And have you thought about that? Here's potential pitfall for this. I'm like, what an awesome guy, man. He doesn't owe me jack,
Yeah.
but he's investing in me because he cares about the business and he cares about people that
Mhm.
he's hired in the company. So that's my ambition, is to do that. When I'm beyond wanting to do the heavy lifting, I want to hang out and make sure that there are opportunities for people, because I do think that's missing in business now. Things are moving so
Yep.
fast that it's more and more difficult to find time to mentor people and to invest in them.
Yeah. Yeah. I feel like during like in the past, like there was more of like a stage of like retirement and people phasing out of retirement and like you said, pouring into people. I was like really lucky that uh the company I had worked with, when I was doing like the robot refurb work, that one of that basically they had brought an employee on that was a did industrial maintenance. They were like 70 years old, retired, um, and so like this guy was very meticulous. It was actually like one of those. I was that young junior where I was like kind of always pissed off because he was so meticulous. Like this tool goes right there, that one goes right there, that one goes right there, and me and him completely disliked each other for like the first year that we worked together, right? And he would go
Right.
to the office and he would tell about how I'm doing this, and I'd go to the office and I'd say I can't handle working with this guy, and we ended up being like best friends. I mean, like he was like my guy, my mentor, like so like it was just awesome, like how it kind of transitioned from like being young, frustrated to work with him to like I want to spend every second that I can with this guy because he knows his things. And yeah, that was the super valuable experience that was kind of similar to yours.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I think one of the challenges in the workspace today, when you think about sort of that incubation period for new people coming into the company, it's not a whole lot different from professional sports, where guy signs a big rookie contract and they expect production, whatever it is, right? In that sport, and we handle it that way in business too, right? We bring a new salesperson on, like, you better start producing, and it's like, wait a second, there's some setup time here. There's a learning curve here, and whether you're in sales, whether you're in operations, engineering, whatever it is, that incubation period seems to be getting shorter and shorter, and not in a good way. So, again, that encouragement for anybody, whether you can provide mentorship or whether if you don't have it, you should seek it for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah, absolutely. That's what I really, really push is like people to like to grab mentorship, especially if it's like feels like it's something you don't feel comfortable doing. Because like that, one of the things of starting this podcast was like selfishly was I was one of these individuals that like struggled with a lot of things in my career through like not feeling confident about something or not feeling comfortable with doing something. Like mentorship was one of them, right? Like all the mentorships that I had were definitely a organic type of mentorship, and I never really pursued. I mean, I was always very like questionary and always asked a lot of questions, so I got a lot of mentorship through that, but I never really like went to somebody and said, hey, like I'm trying to learn this thing, can you help me learn this thing, and like them really like kind of walk me through that process. And it would have helped, I think it would have helped accelerate some of my knowledge, and it especially would have relieved like a lot of stress, because like even as like a controls engineer, whenever I had like other engineers available that I could have like asked for help with, like I would sit there and just hard learn everything, like reading through documentation, Google forums, like doing a lot of hard learning that I probably could have done just by going to somebody and asking them for help.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And the funny thing is, it's out there with your colleagues, with your leaders. It's out there, and usually it's free for the asking. You just have to have the courage to ask for it. And like, one of my sons is like not a question asker, and it's drives me up the wall. It's like, dude, ask me the question. Don't make assumptions, right? Because you're
Mm,
wasting your time doing it this way. there's merit to both. I mean, people do, everybody learns their own way. Some people learn the hard way. Some people learn the easy way. I think there's a lot to be said for a little bit of both.
Mm.
But yeah, I think a real key though is sometimes some good mentors will go out of their way, like Bill DeBoe did with me, and he's certainly not the only one, but go out of their way to come and approach you and and offer that mentorship, and maybe not even formally, right? It doesn't have to be you're necessarily your manager or anything, but somebody that will somebody you can bounce stuff off of. But as the person who needs the mentorship, if somebody's not willingly pouring that into you right now, for God's sake, you got to go find somebody and ask for
Yeah.
it, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
I think you just think you're crazy not to.
Yeah. One other little trick that I'd add is like find creative ways to ask questions. So this follows more the mentorship that I went through. Uh, find creative ways to ask questions that don't feel like you're trying to figure out how to do the thing, right? So, because like I'll give you some examples where I had worked with some guys, and it was kind of like one of those situations where they don't want to share their knowledge, right? They're being very reserved with their knowledge. They want to hold on to it, like those type of people. And what I found is like I'd find like really creative ways to ask questions where, like, let's say for instance they're thinking in the mindset of like this person's trying to steal my job, they're trying to become better than me, like they're thinking in that way. So I'm thinking about how do I ask this question in a way where it doesn't come off like that at all. Like, oh, that's really weird. Like, why do you do that like that? Or what? You know what I mean? Like, it is like kind of just if you word it in a different way, then like they'll give this answer, and then you're like, okay, got you, okay,
Yeah, it's almost like a prosecuting attorney trying to get an answer out of somebody. And hey, if I just ask it a different way, I'll get my answer,
yeah,
right?
absolutely,
Yeah, I think there's a lot to be said for kind of the discovery there, and I think just kind of laying yourself bare a little bit too, and going, look, I'm not going to try to pretend like I know this stuff, but and I'm not going to ask you directly because it's going to make you feel threatened, but I'm gonna have an open dialogue with you and talk with you about it. I like to think eventually, people like that, you can chip away at them. I view customers that way too, right?
mm-hmm.
There are a lot of there are a lot of customers that just really get their jollies out of giving salespeople a really hard time. And I've been cussed out up and down, side to side out there in the field. I mean, this is a rough and tumble business, but you know, I think when you demonstrate, hey, I'm not going to go away, and I believe in what I'm doing enough that I'm going to keep enduring your beatings.
Right,
Eventually they'll relent and go, all right, what do you really
yeah.
want? What can we do?
If you wouldn't mind, what are some of or what is a key thing that has helped you in your career?
I'll tell you, I preach this to my sons, and I feel like I've gotten them both following this and what they're doing, and I've said this to people that I'm mentoring. I've even said it to people that I've had to let go. I can't say enough about harnessing your passion and getting into something that you can be passionate about, something that gets you out of bed every morning and has got something new and exciting for you every day, whether that's a challenge or whether that's a reward or whatever it is. I think passion is so critical. And I mean, not just, I think it goes from the interview process. I would say that to anybody who's out there interviewing for a job that they want. As somebody that conducts interviews, I want to know that you're chomping at the bit to do this, and I mean in a genuine way. Don't fake it because most of us doing interviews have seen the faking. But if you've got a real passion, don't be afraid to let that out.
Mm,
It's not uncool to be excited about something you do at work,
yeah,
right? And and I think for the individual, finding ways, if there's something, maybe it's not, maybe your job is not a situation where you're 100% passionate about it, but there's something about it that does inspire a lot of passion in you. Hone in on that. Find ways to do more of that. If you're looking for a career, um, don't don't skip an opportunity to get into something that you're passionate around. Good example is this. I just randomly got into this business. I just literally was answering a want ad while I was in college, right? And and found my way to staying in this. And it's like The Godfather; they sucked me in, right? But here I am. I developed a passion for customer service. I developed a passion around industrial automation. I feel very fortunate that way. But if I knew at 20, I'm a musician, by the way. If I knew at 20 that I would discover in myself the ability to sell, I would tell you that I would work for Fender, or I would work for Gibson, or I would work somewhere in that space, because I would say, hey, I can do this, and I love that product.
Mm,
So I'm gonna be really good at that, and I'm gonna have a lot of fun doing it, right?
yeah.
So yeah, one of my sons is really trying to figure out how to go through all that, and we ultimately determined, you know what, police work is going to be what does it for him. Now, scares me half to death that he's going to go do that, but I'm also very proud of him, because I think it's very noble and something we need out there, right? But he's going to find satisfaction, and even though it's, let's face it, it's not the greatest paying job, he's passionate about it, and if he gets in there and he harnesses that passion, there'll be opportunities for him to make a good living in that, because he's going to get promoted. He's not going to be a beat cop forever, right? He's going to go on to do more exciting things, and have progressive levels of responsibility, which I think most of us are seeking out there.
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, being passionate, I think, is super, super important. This industry for me, it's definitely my calling as well. I really don't know what I would do outside of robotics automation. I mean, maybe it's because I tasted it and now like that's that's like really all I want. But definitely, like I love the diversity of it. I love every aspect of it. Really, everything. Every day is a new challenge. You get to experience new things every day. Like, and I think that whenever you identify like these things that you're passionate about, like you said, you would have made the shift to maybe go sell musical equipment and whatnot. Like if you can just identify those things that really make you passionate, or like find the thing that you're passionate about and then find like businesses that are around that. Maybe it's you go work
Yeah,
for like a drum manufacturer. We were actually watching like some manufacturing videos. That's how I spend a lot of my time, is like I'll watch manufacturing videos, and it's like content or like just documentaries, like anything, right? Or just random like manufacturing videos. But I was watching like a documentary style one before, and they were building drums and stuff, right? And so like that's a really cool creative way, like for if there's a thing that you like if you like electronics, maybe you could work in a electronic manufacturing facility, and then you get to see how the electronic device is built, and see the chips going in it, and all the processes that are revolved around making that product. And it could be a creative way to get your foot in the door with whatever you're already passionate about.
yeah, no, absolutely. And I would, for somebody, I've got a sales bent, obviously, but I mean, I would say, my son, who ended up, before he ended up making this decision to go into police work, he was a varsity golfer, shooting the mid 70s, and I'm like, but he wants to sell. He's a personality guy, right? So I'm like, you should maybe find a way to sell golf equipment. Or, he was also, he worked in construction. I said, maybe what you need to do is go out there and get a degree in construction and work in it a while, and then move yourself over to the sales side, which is how a lot of people actually come into the sales side of the business. Is they get in, and if you want to talk about automation, a lot of the guys that can sell automation once upon a time did programming, or they did refurbishment work, or whatever it may
Yep.
be, but they did the nuts and bolts of the business and really learned it from the ground up. And as a salesperson, to already have the technical stuff built in when you're selling something that's technical, oh my
Oh
gosh,
yeah.
then you just have to learn the sales part. And I'm a big believer that people, because a lot of people think, oh, sales, you have to do Sandler Institute, and you have to have all this formal training and all that. If you know the product and you're passionate about the product, and you can educate yourself on what the customer's needs are, you can do really well.
Yeah.
And in fact, you might do a lot better than really well.
Yeah.
I've seen a lot of people do it, and I've been fortunate to be a part of leading folks like that.
It's super powerful to take like you said, the nuts and bolts of learning like that engineering facet, and then being able to transition that into sales, because it makes that process so much easier. And then once you converted to sales, like if you're just a personable enough individual, and really, I think a big thing is being kind, right? Like one of the biggest things that has propelled me is like be kind, always add more value to people than anybody else around you. So like if you think in those type of ways, like then you're face to face with your customer, and if you're trying to add more value to them than you're taking for yourself, something about your dialogue changes, something that your posture, everything about you kind of just changes to be more, you can say, relatable. Like you just sell better, right? Like to be honest, those are the things that have saved me. Like I still can't sell, if you call it that, right? Like when it comes to like hard sales, I'm not good at that whatsoever. Like my only version of sales is just like trying to do the right thing, like knowing products, and like kind of knowing the direction that we're trying to go with our company.
Yeah, no, absolutely. I tell you that when I got pulled over into sales, the guy who mentored me there, we went out, we started making sales calls, and he's taking the lead, and he's gonna show me the ropes. We go and we do our first appointment. We go in and we talk to this guy for an hour about everything that you could possibly imagine, except our product and our service. And we walked out of there, and I said, hey, so that was fun, but but when do we get around to selling something? He goes, you'll get there. Here's the most important thing we needed to do today was make a connection with this guy. He'll buy something from you eventually because you had a great conversation with him today. You sat around and you talked. This guy had University of Tennessee volunteer stuff everywhere around his office. We talked about football. We talked about his kids because he had pictures of his kids there. We talked about everything that was important to him to get him to realize that we took a personal interest in him,
Yeah.
right? And to go, hey, there's more to this than dollars and
Mm.
cents. Now, not every single salesperson out there is genuine about that, but I would say to anybody that wants to be successful, you should take an interest in somebody that you're going to deal with, right? I mean, as much as you would a colleague, treat a customer like that. Get to know them, get to value them, and build that relationship on trust. And I I say this all the time. If you're doing all the right things, money will follow. But if you're putting money up there as the very first thing, customers will sniff that out in a heartbeat. They're not going to trust you, and maybe in the end you're not trustworthy in the first place. Who knows? But I think it's all about a reciprocal relationship where we're interested in each other and kind of build from there.
You got any last valuable points to add to the community before we go today?
Um, I think that as you go about what you're doing, do it to the best of your ability. And I think that these days there are a lot of people that aren't doing that. And so I'm reminded of Dwayne Johnson, The Rock, who always likes to say, "Be the hardest worker in the
Mm,
room." That's the kind of mentality you got to have in this business to get ahead and to kind of achieve the level of success that you'd like to. Be willing to outwork everybody, and that doesn't mean killing yourself working 12 hours a day, but I mean it's working hard, it's working smart, but it's working creatively and it's working diligently. And I think it's got everything to do with having a good attitude that you bring, because whether you're facing customers, whether you're facing colleagues, managers, attitude will go a million miles for you.
absolutely, absolutely. I got to work on stop overworking myself. Maybe 2025 we'll reevaluate.
You and me both.
Awesome, Matt. Where can everybody find you at?
You can find me on LinkedIn, but you can find my company at tieindustrial.com, and we've got an e-commerce site that is fanicworld.com, where you can buy parts from us. And we recently purchased robots.com, and we're going to be doing a lot of exciting things with that website coming up this year. So looking forward to rolling that out to everybody.
Awesome. Thank you for joining us today, Matt, and thank you for adding your valuable points.
Malachi, thanks for having me, and appreciate everybody's time today.
Awesome.